Good morning, Tony. Thank you for joining.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So thank you actually for joining us today for yet another episode of What's Up AEC. Our today's topic is the 2021 infrastructure bill and its implications. How is your AEC firm preparing? I couldn't think of any other topic actually, given what's happening right now. So, not only are the next few days intense, as some kind of explain or kind of address them, but they are exciting as well. Why? Because I believe we are all about to witness a new era of repairs, refurbishment, and modernizing of our country's infrastructure, the likes of which we've never seen before. I've never seen before, for sure. I'm, of course, talking about the infrastructure bill, which promises to repair and maintain roads, bridges, build new high-speed railways, new water treatment plants, provide new sources of renewable energy, and broadband internet. It sums up where we're at as a country, in other words. Now, the bill is still up in the air. I was just talking to Mr. Charles earlier, and the situation is so fluid, it's kind of changing from one minute to the other. Let's start and kick off this session by having a quick introduction to who we have here on the call, starting with Mr. Charles Gozdziewski. Mr. Charles, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Ayman, for having me. My name is Charlie Gozdziewski, also known as Charlie G. It's because I have a long second name. I wear two hats here today. I am the Chair Emeritus of Hardesty Hanover. We are a mid-size transportation firm with approximately 450 professionals and 30 offices in the United States. And we do have a long-term specialty, which we consider one of our premier deliverables, and that is movable bridges and movable structures. We've done some of the most magnificent movable structures in the world, and we're pretty proud of it. My second hat is I am the immediate past chair of ACEC, the American Council of Engineering Companies. In case you don't know about them, that represents 5,500 engineering companies and also has 680,000 employees. And one of our big activities is business and the business of engineering advocacy. And we are plugged right in with all this activity that's going on with this infrastructure bill. So happy to ask you gentlemen questions and see where we all stand on this.
Mr. John Renolds, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm John Renolds. I'm the IT director for SWA Group. They're a landscape architecture firm. We have 7 offices in the United States, one over in Shanghai and one in the Middle East. We do work with a lot of the AEC firms, of course, and we do work across the world. I do have experience with, a lot of remote offices and outer areas and working in different countries. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to have you on the show. Mr. Mike Albitz, you want to introduce yourself?
Mike Albitz from MSA Professional Services. We're an engineering architecture firm in the Midwest, typically 4 office. I'm getting kind of a feedback here, sorry. 4 states, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin, 17 offices, about 400 employees. I'm the IT, I'm not the IT director, but right there below the manager, and I guess I've been with the firm for 20 plus years, member of ACEC IT forums, stuff like that. So I'm pretty plugged into that stuff too.
Thank you, Mike. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. Mr. Christopher Rump.
Yes, I'm sorry. My name is Christopher Rump, and I'm the ITIS manager for engineering consulting firm. And we have 6 offices in 3 different states. And we're just looking at our options for possibly using workstations in the cloud instead of purchasing the expensive ones that we have on our desktop. And we use Autodesk applications primarily. Most of our data is located in the cloud. So we feel it's a possible option for us to look at getting onboarded with Iron Orbit sometime here in the future. And this is a big change for us to make. Obviously, we have a lot of PCs, spend a lot of money on them, and just want to look at making that transition sooner rather than later if it is an option for us. So hoping to gain a little more insight.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chris, for joining and joining us today, actually. Mr. Ray Spangler.
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Ray Spangler. I'm the CTO here at Barge Design Solutions. We have 17 offices over on the east side here. I spent the majority of my career in network engineering and am fairly freshly minted into the AEC side, so I'm still getting my feet wet here.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Ray, for joining us today. Moving on, Mr. Jeff Urbanchuk, thank you for joining us. You want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sorry, Jeff Urbanchuk with ACEC, just coming on to listen in on the conversation.
Thank you for joining. Appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff. And then I think we have Mr. Tony Valasak.
Yeah, Tony Vlasic. I'm Executive IT Director for American Structure Point. We're a mid-sized engineering firm with about 13 remote locations. I've been with the company for 20 years, taking care of everything IT. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Tony. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. I hope this is going to be as exciting to you as it is to us. Well, pretty much the very first question that we have over here is, many would say, including our special guest today, Mr. Charlie Gozdziewski, that, this is a long overdue bill, right? The infrastructure bill, and the country needs actually a little bit more than what we have right now on the floor, or hitting the floor anytime soon. So, Mr. Charles, what do you think? What are your take on this? Where are we? Is this bill enough?
Thank you for the segue. This bill is really historic, and this conversation has been going on for a long, long time. And you mentioned it that you're probably a lot younger than I am, and you don't remember any type of investment. And you're absolutely right. It probably goes back into the 1950s is probably the last we had such a historic type of investment. And let me be clear about this bill. This bill is an investment. It's not a response to the pandemic. It's not a stimulus bill. It's an investment. This is what we've been talking about for a long time. This is what the country needs to modernize and remain competitive on a global scale. So this infrastructure bill right now is hanging in the balance. We can talk about that in a moment. But again, I just want to make clear that this is an investment, and people are looking at it as a political football. It's not. It's a recognition that we have not invested in the infrastructure as we have should for many decades. You just go back to the last administration. We thought we had to deal with the prior administration, and they were talking about $2-3 trillion in infrastructure. So right now we're at 1.2, and it's a start. And I think it will help us to not only maintain what we have, but also to upgrade and modernize our infrastructure. It's an exciting time. I don't know if I can sleep the next couple of days.
We've been seeing that ACEC in particular has been pushing towards an amendment to the bill, adding more components or items to the bill.
Yeah, that amendment that we're talking about has been added to another piece of legislation called the National Defense Authorization Act, and that deals with the PPP loan forgiveness aspect of this, which is kind of a pandemic-related issue. We were trying to get this as part of this infrastructure bill. We had Senate. We thought we had bipartisan support at the last second. The last day, it was pulled. And what they did is they put our amendment in with a package of other bipartisan amendments, attached it to the National Defense Authorization Act, which I think we feel pretty confident will pass. So we don't have any real big major amendments to this bill. We just want to voice our support for it. We think it'll go a long way, not only go to the traditional surface transportation and water, but now it's going to increase the rail and energy and broadband, which is really needed, and it's being recognized.
And how do we keep this bill out of politics? Because it's unfortunately, I mean, if you hear the news, you get on the news, especially in the past 48 hours, it's crazy. It's becoming more and more politicized rather than depoliticized, and this is very frustrating to anyone who worked or kind of lobbied for the bill for such a long time. So what are your thoughts? Do you think this is going to pass or not? Is it going to be coupled or decoupled? What are your takes over there? What should we hope for?
I echo your frustration. This again is extremely frustrating. Here we have, we're talking about infrastructure, which has total bipartisan support, and it's being held hostage by both political parties for their own political gains, which is very unfortunate. This is something that our country needs, our country wants, and the country is willing to pay for. But what the politics of it is that when people want something and they can give it to them, they leverage it out to hold out for something else that they want. If you're going to talk about the aspects of its actual passing, the latest I heard in the last hour, it looks like it's going to be very, very close vote if it goes to a vote. And right now they're saying it will go to a vote tomorrow. But looks like what they're trying to do is they're getting some Republicans not to vote for it, and they're getting some Democrats take an opposite point of view. So there's going to be some horse trading back and forth with votes, but it's going to be up to if the speaker has the votes, you'll see it come to a vote. But again, I think it's just a coin flip at this particular point.
And if we ended up on the wrong side of the coin, so what are the odds? What are we looking at? Will this bill be postponed indefinitely, or are we putting it at risk? Are we jeopardizing the ever existence of this bill?
Well, the one thing that has to happen, we need to reauthorize the surface transportation program, and it actually I believe ends at September 30th. So as a minimum, I would think you would see that 5-year authorization, and that's in the approximately $550 million. I think that will happen. The real investment is the money, the additional $560 billion on top of that, which would really make a difference in the infrastructure, and that's what will impact our firms and impact all the companies in the next 5 years.
I have a question for him.
Of course.
Charlie, so I know and you're talking about if it doesn't pass, but if it does pass, what's your thoughts on best case scenario for when the funds will start to actually trickle in to be utilized?
I'm going to give some kind of general idea about that. I don't have all the specifics, but what I was told is that pretty much it'll be front-end loaded. Approximately 18% of the money will be allocated in the first year, and then there'll kind of be a steady growth after the remaining 4 years in a range of only about 3 or 4% per year. So you'll see projects that are waiting to happen, get recognized first. So I think you'll see a big burst. What that really impacts into our companies, ACEC estimates that this will have a 6% increase in engineering activity over the 5 years. And that really means 82,000 new jobs over 6 years. And then also those 82,000 jobs really mean out in the real world that our foundation, the ACEC Research Institute, estimates that for every one job an engineer creates, 2 more jobs are created in the economy. So by passing this bill, we'll be looking at adding 245,000 new jobs to the economy.
Well, one of the questions that we had over here is how much will be solved by the infrastructure bill, and will it be enough? And I'm opening the floor over here, specifically picking the brain of Mr. Mike Albitz. Mike, we kind of had an indirect conversation, right? And I know that you had kind of different thoughts around the bill. What does it have? What does it cover? And what does not cover? Will it be enough? Do you think this bill is enough? Are you excited for it?
I never get excited when it gets politicized, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. There's so many individual ideas that people are trying to push through on this same bill that it makes me kind of not really want to pay attention. But I don't know if it'll be enough or not. I just we traveled to where I'm having this meeting at right now, and the roads were pretty bad. So I definitely get that we need to do something with our infrastructure, but I'm guessing we just have to keep putting more money into it to keep our infrastructure better.
So some of the information that we had over here is that there are more than 220,000 bridges in the United States in serious need of repair. 220,000 bridges in serious need of repair. And if we continue the same rate of repair that we have right now, we'll probably need around 40 years to repair all these bridges. Now I see that the bill had $40 billion to upgrade, primarily to upgrade bridges. Is that enough? $40 billion? For 220,000 bridges?
I really wouldn't know. I wouldn't think it would be enough, but I'm not sure.
So Charles, going back to you, how did they break down all these numbers? How did they decide that we only need 40 billion for bridges, 73 billion in new energy funding, 55 billion to clean drinking water? I mean, how did this come through?
Most of the programs that are under government ownership or operation, they'll do an asset evaluation of what they control. And they will have grades, they may be different types of scales, but they will be able to evaluate all their existing facilities, what their actual condition is. From that, they establish pretty much a list of projects that need help to maintain what they have. Okay, and then what they do have is, on top of that, a capital program to modernize and to improve their facilities. Kind of condition-based, where they generated the initial estimates. But I can tell you, so I want to go back to the bridges, and it kind of applies to all assets in general. You know, that is kind of a current picture. But in reality, all these assets will probably erode or degrade exponentially. You look at the transportation side, you know, when we do a transportation project, we say we're going to do it for 75 years life. Can you imagine what transportation is going to look like in 20 years? You know, driverless cars and heavier vehicles and faster travel times and more people on the road, you know, more regional networks instead of local networks, the interconnectivity of digital platforms and all these smart vehicles. It's going to be unbelievable. So when you say, is that enough? The answer is no, absolutely no. And, you know, we can only measure it, I think, as part of our GDP. And when we do that, we rank 13th in the world, and that's just not good enough.
And speaking of GDP, I believe the bill will boost the AEC industry contribution to GDP by 75 billion. So that rank of 13th in the world, that's including the bill's 75 billion or excluding the bill's 75 billion?
Excluding.
Excluding. So where would that put us? Well, I don't think not anywhere close to being a leader, right? Like where we'd like to be. Not even close. You know, speaking of also the pretty much there's a 50 billion that has been proposed to make our infrastructure more resilient to superstorms. Think of the storm Uri hitting Texas last winter and pretty much taking or paralyzing the state's electrical grid and its water system. Can we think of, is that 50 billion going to specific states that usually get hit by superstorms or no? How do they usually map this?
Well, again, it's going to go by state. All these estimates are state by state. I can tell you that probably one of the bigger impacts on owners of these assets will be the local assets, because what usually happens is the state takes the first shot at all these federal funds, and then what's left over goes to the locals. And I think you're going to see a big impact on capital programs on a local level. So now when you ask about regional events, sustainability, we know a lot more than we did 10, 12, 15 years ago. And the way we design these new projects, whether it's water or energy or transportation, is a lot more different. We do take into the impacts of sustainability, you know, greening the projects, make sure that they're more environmental friendly. So it's a different world, and that's why this bill is coming at a good time. I think, you know, we know a lot more than we did 10 years ago, more than we did, you know, 30, 40 years ago when a lot of our infrastructure was built.
And speaking of energy, 73 billion in new energy funding, and I'm guessing that, but the problem is that our energy sector is 75 years old or built on 75-year-old technology. The electrical grid in particular is based on a 75-year-old technology, believe it or not, but that's where we're at right now as a nation. Again, I mean, looking at the numbers and trying to just kind of bridge the gap over here, would 73 billion really solve the problem? Given the surge in energy and electrical energy need, I'm just wondering. And did and the other question that I had is, did the private sector take part in these estimates or in these forecasts? Did they ever engage the private sector on these, or not really?
Well, they did have associations involved, like the Chamber of Commerce and Better Business Bureaus got involved. They had some input, but no, not to my knowledge that they really had direct contact with the private sector, which has a huge part in the infrastructure environment.
Got it. Moving on here. So what's involved with modernizing our infrastructure? You know, part of it is pretty much updating the IT systems to better protect against cyber attack vulnerabilities. That seemed to be a very hot topic these days because, you know, IT security is a pressing need and an urgent need actually for every engineering company out there. We also need to ensure integrity of our supply chains to keep products and people moving efficiently across the country. And again, our infrastructure right now, as we speak, ranks as 13th in the world. Mr. Ray, you've asked a question earlier of how soon will the money hit the market. What difference does it make to you?
Well, it just, I mean, you know, as we talk about it, it's government, right? And here we are waiting on the bill to get passed. And by the time you start getting that influx into the market, when does it actually start to hit into the projects? When do the people are able to start planning for the projects? I'm just wondering how far out, because as I'm sure we're going to be talking about soon, is the resources to manage those projects. Right now, we're all dealing with trying to resource shortages. It's hard to get those resources. So, you know, how do we all need to be planning ahead for this and trying to see when that influx might start coming in.
What is the biggest challenge when we talk about resources? Is it the systems, the tools, the processes, or the people? Because
right now, for what I'm seeing is people. I see a lot of just struggles with people. Getting the resources, obviously, the work arrangements is a big one right now, right? As far as where people will go. We've kind of got to a national pool, whether we like it or not. And so it's really kind of changed the whole hiring process for a lot of us. We're all still, I think we're all probably still in the same boat. We're all still working through that. What does the workplace of tomorrow look like?
So, Mr. Charles, we keep talking about creating jobs, but I don't see people applying for these jobs. It looks like we have a major resourcing problem, starting from the restaurant next door to the convenience store and all the way up the ranks. I don't understand what's going on. Everywhere you go right now, you see, signs, for we're hiring, we need people, and there just don't seem to be enough people. And at the same time, ACEC, you guys are also pushing for the triple P protection, right, to be covered in the next, as you explained earlier, on the next legislation or bill. Wouldn't that kind of, would that help actually? Because I feel like the more we kind of send out checks, we're kind of confirming or letting the people, sending the signals out to the people that it's okay not to feel the urgency to come back and have a job.
Well, I think this is two different issues. The PPP, the Payroll Protection Plan loan, was meant to keep current staff on board and employed and not be laid off. Firms were giving loans on that basis, and then especially if you work in the public side, would get penalized by a negative impact on its overhead audit and FAR audits. So that's separate. That was just retaining employees. But going back to the challenge, and I agree with Ray, I think the biggest challenge is going to be talent. And, in the engineering industry, and it's probably in the computer sciences as well, but in the engineering industry, we are only really have a pool of talent that comes out of colleges. We do have some restrictions from international talent coming in. We try to get some relief on that, but that is only a small part of it. So, if we're going to have a big change in culture and how we treat infrastructure, we have to get the message across in society in general. I look at when you have an engineering shortage, just like any shortage, sometimes it's probably the best thing for engineering salaries, because that really means that when people are competing for the same talent, the salaries go up. That's a good thing for our industry for attracting new talent on our basis. It'll take a while, It's probably won't solve the issue that will come out of this infrastructure bill. But again, if everybody's on board with infrastructure in the future and salaries go up in engineering, that'll go a long way in solving that challenge for staffing shortages.
Mr. John Renolds, a question to you. So how should your organization prepare for the potential wave of new infrastructure spending? If this happens, if this passes on tomorrow and projects starts hitting the market, the next 3 months or so, I think everybody is excited to kind of, roll it here and just as quickly as possible and get some traction on it. What are you guys, how are you guys prepared? How are you guys preparing or kind of what measures are you putting in place?
Well, I know our company has already been keeping an eye on all of this and preparing. They started preparing 6 months, a year ago. We also have a what we call XL Lab that goes out there and looks at future things that need to be done, future ways of doing and different ways of doing things. So we've been waiting for this for quite a while. On the IT side, we're looking at being able to utilize our resources across our separate offices. Because in the past, we were more siloed. And that's why we're looking at Iron Orbit also. Because we have a resource issue too. They can't get enough good designers and production people, staff in. So we're sharing more staff across offices now than we did in the past.
Very interesting. And that takes me to, we also have some research over here. 90% of 245 AEC firms surveyed in 2018 said they faced talent and workforce shortages. The challenge has only gotten worse, honestly, from 2018 till today. And we didn't have any infrastructure bill in between. Right now, we are talking about 245,000 new jobs between engineering and like creative professionals and just the typical workers to support them. Has there been any effort put in place to bridge that gap? I mean, is it just down to the salaries increasing in that space? Would that solve the problem, Mr. Charles?
It will solve the problem, but engineers always tend to be creative, and we really have to look internally first of how we look for the capacity to take on additional assignments or additional work. In general, our firm is a very conservative firm. We have pretty much been very conservative as far as trying to grow aggressively. We kind of grow moderately and conservatively. We have made some acquisitions in the past couple of years that's helped us. We're also targeting other possible acquisitions to help us in capacity. So you're going to probably see a big uptick in M&A activity to help solve some of the issues when some of this work starts to really flow out of this bill.
John, is outsourcing an option? Maybe to other countries? Is that something that you would consider at a certain point in time?
Well, I mean, outsourcing is always a little more difficult, especially given the type of work that we do. But the pandemic did actually outsource some of our staff. So we had people on visas, and they were no longer able to maintain the visa. So our Shanghai office has hired them, and they do work on other offices' projects from China.
And that actually brings up a very important point over here, and maybe I need to also ask Mr. Charles about it. If there has been any effort to kind of ease up on the immigration laws, maybe we need to bring more people, more talent.
Again, we support international help in our industry. Again, we now are dipping toes into the political world, and it's a whole different discussion when we get in that area. People are sympathetic to our challenges and our needs to deliver engineering projects, but again, there's a lot of other issues that involves with bring in international talent into the United States. Again, I just want to go back. It's going to be a challenge, and it's actually a good challenge, and it's actually a positive challenge when you have more work than you can deliver, and that's what you always want to have. Be it so, we figure out ways of doing it. Sometimes some of the best answer is just say no to some of the work, because if you take on commitments and you can't deliver, your company's reputation is going to go downhill very quickly, no matter how big or how small. But if you can't deliver those projects, so maybe a smart business decision is not taking in more than you can chew. The other aspect of this bill passes, and it's a kind of a message more to a smaller firm, is the cash flow aspect of growing. I've seen small firms that all of a sudden they become part of a big project, and all of a sudden they go from 10 people to 25 people, and they go bankrupt. They just don't have the financing or the financial knowledge to handle it. So that's another aspect that should be brought out is the cash flow aspects of potentially a rapid growth, especially in the small engineering firms.
And that's a very, very, very important point over here. And I agree with you. Lots of firms actually do fail, specifically when these projects come in and they fail specifically to scale up as fast as they need to. Changing gears over here, what are some of the KPIs used to benchmark performance, against peers? How will your firm realize growth opportunities and stay competitive? Again, back to you, Mike. When you look at your KPIs and you're asked to deliver on a specific project really quick, and yet maintain these KPIs to ensure that the quality of the product that is coming out of the company is acceptable. How do you do it? How do you benchmark the performance? How do you make sure that you guys are where you need to be from performance perspective?
That one I'm not very sure on. I'm assuming that we just continue to maintain the standards that we always have, and work the way we always have, and provide the products that we currently do. I don't do a whole lot of stuff with the project side of things. I'm more of an IT guy. So
and speaking of IT, actually, I'm gonna press you on that one. Speaking of IT, what is your most precious resource, a business critical resource that you have right now?
I would say security. That's our biggest concern in IT that we've been dealing with lately.
And I'm assuming that most of these projects are going to be government projects, which means you got to tighten up your security and you got to comply with the data regulations that comes from the government. We're talking about probably FedRAMP. We're talking about NIST, right? And you got to make sure that you're in pretty much in alignment with all these data regulations. Do you think that's also an investment that you guys need to do? And how quick can you actually wrap up your business continuity plan, your disaster recovery plan to meet those requirements? And security is costly.
Yep.
It's very costly. It's not cheap at all.
We've been looking at a NIST compliance for a couple of years. So we've been going down that path. Well, I'd say about 2019 we started it. We just don't have the staff, but our CEO is behind us getting our certification moving forward. It's a very high labor intensive engagement. So we spend a lot of time at. We've been just getting everything we can in place to get our NIST certification, and we have a consultant helping us with it. So I don't know many firms that actually are NIST compliant, at least in the ACEC IT side of things. There might be a few, but most of us, it seems like all of us are going down that same path.
And I agree with you. And it's a challenge of how do you manage your cash flow, because to become NIST or FedRAMP certified, you got to invest a whole lot of money, a big sum of money. You got to put it in place. You need consultants to help you. You need auditors to come and check on you and make sure that you're in compliance and certify your compliance level or state. You need to invest in tools and systems, and these are very, very, very expensive from an IT perspective. I think they're the most expensive when you talk about infrastructure. And at the same time, you still haven't got the cash yet, because for you to earn the projects from the government, you got to have these, as a checklist first. And this brings in also a challenge specifically to the medium and small enterprises. The cash is not there, but we're expected to be certified before we can get to touch any of these projects. How do we solve such a problem? I don't see the infrastructure bill paying any attention to this.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that. What we've had in our industry is we've had some mid-sized firms get hit with ransomware. That's cost them millions and millions of dollars, and that scared the hell out of my CEO. And once that happened, we started really getting pushed. We were pushing it before, and we kept saying, no, it's too expensive. No, it's too expensive. And then we started seeing that happen, and it was almost like the checkbook or the coffers open said, you guys need to do something. And we've just been increasing our security posture without breaking the bank, but we've just been taking baby steps and keep moving forward to secure our industry, secure our infrastructure, IT now, inside, and make sure that we're not the next person that makes the news. And that's really what our CEO wants.
Mr. Charles, is that too much to ask? Go for the government and ask them to kind of put something there to help small and medium, specifically small and medium, creative houses or, engineering firms to boost up their security and invest more in their security to meet the data regulations required by the government to work on government projects.
I totally agree with everything that's been said. So you can pay me now, you can pay me later, and it's going to come back. 95% of this money, transportation, comes out of our taxes, and it goes to the government, and they are supposed to be spending it wisely. Now, if you don't make the right investments, you're going to lose that investment. So yes, I agree that there should be some government oversight as far as how security of the information systems that are being used is absolutely essential. And and I agree with Mike. I know some companies who went through ransomware and actually some malware. They were just trying to destroy the company without even asking for ransom. I saw that CEOs and presidents, they changed overnight. They became taken down as these were very high-level people who were taken down, and there was nothing they can do. It was out of their control, and it's just a bad feeling, and I hope nobody has to go through it. And the only way that can be it was really on a federal level across the United States, and because this is coming probably from all over the world, and it's beyond any individual company's control.
And this probably is not a very popular question, but how important is it to kind of activate the small and medium kind of segments of the AEC industry compared to the large corporations? Because I'm assuming there isn't a specific mechanism of how are we going to start kind of passing these projects down the pyramid from the large corporations to the smaller ones down the base of the pyramid, kind of awarding these companies with these projects. I don't know if there's a specific criteria that would be followed to make sure that everybody kind of benefit or gets their share or not. So the question is actually two parts. Number one, is it really strategic and important to activate pretty much the base of the pyramid, which are the smaller companies, specifically in different states who are, I would say, less cash-rich states? And number two, if it's strategic and important, are there any mechanisms in place to get these projects down to them?
Well, let's begin with the actual numbers. There are 5,500 engineering companies in the United States. 90% of those companies are small firms. It's an unbelievable number of the amount of engineering companies. 90% are small firms.
And what's their share? What's their share of the spending? That's a good one. So
well, that's different. But answering your question, this is one of the greatest time to be an engineer and an entrepreneur. If you want to go off on your own, this is a great opportunity, because what this legislation bill does, probably the single most important thing that this bill does, It establishes a stability and certainty for 5 years. That it takes a lot of risk out of starting a company, knowing that there's going to be a program in place for at least 5 years, and hopefully we change the culture of the society around and recognize the importance of what infrastructure means to everybody at all levels of the society. It affects everybody. But again, the opportunity for small and medium firms is tremendous. I think this is more. It'll be a lot more now than it was yesterday.
So Ray, you're one of the larger companies over here. Looking at that segment and pyramid, would your company consider awarding some projects or kind of outsourcing, subcontracting smaller companies here and there for some of the projects that you get in?
Well, I think we all of us here work with each other, right? So I think that just was going to be an offshoot of the influx of work. I think that just be a natural need. If the work came in that quick, if we don't have the people resources to manage it, the only way we're all going to benefit is to work together to accomplish the goal and to grow. So I think that's just going to be a natural offshoot.
And I can't agree anymore. If anything, I wish to see more and more legislation. Maybe that's pushing it too far, but I'd like to see more and more vehicles to get that money down all the way to the smaller entities here and there. I personally have engaged with engineering companies in states like Montana and the Midwest, and I can tell you these guys could really benefit from and should actually get their fair share of these projects, because they're barely surviving. They don't really get as much, especially with the COVID hitting in. Triple P is extremely important, but what's more important as well is to make sure that they get their fair share of what the government is putting in this monumental infrastructure bill. My question here also goes to Mr. Noel Frederick. Mr. Noel, can you hear us? Mr. Noel. All right.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Yes, sure.
John Renolds. Yeah, so prior to working for SWA Group, I worked for AECom. I'm sure everybody's familiar with who they are. If you're not, they're an extremely large company with silos in everything. I don't think companies that large can react this quickly. So I believe a lot of that is going to have to flow down to the smaller companies. From what I saw when I worked for them for 9 years in IT. And I just don't think that they have the bandwidth to take care of these projects. It's going to have to flow down to everybody else.
Well, that's very assuring. I second your opinion over here. I hope it does. So how can technology help address challenges and obstacles? Technology adoption, optimization will be a defining factor definitely for this. And specifically, we're talking about collaboration over here. So Mike, you were saying that, your CEO, has security to be a top priority right now from a technology perspective. If we are to move down from the security, what would be down the list? What would be number 2?
I think COVID has actually given us a lot of the tools we need to do this. We were forced into doing work from home, work from anywhere, basically. I think that puts us in a good stance to do whatever we need to do when this bill gets passed and the work gets passed down to us. Because like you've stated earlier, the talent pool is spread out everywhere, and to hire people, we have to let them work from wherever they need to be. And I think that's the next most important thing is the flexibility of the workplace.
And I cannot agree anymore. However, you are one of the companies who had issues in pretty much getting every one of their employees connected or with a decent connection, if I may say. And this bill does actually allocate, let me see the numbers here, billions of dollars eventually to go out and expand internet or high-speed internet to rural areas as well. Do you think it's enough? Well, at least does your team get to benefit from that?
We saw that several years ago, I'd say 10 years ago, that there was some fiber being run. I don't know who passed the bill or what bill it was, but the bigger rural offices that we had got better internet connections. Now I think this bill is going to focus mainly on homes, which will help then with these telecommuters, especially where they don't have internet service, or the internet that they have are old DSL lines which is redundant, but DSL connections that don't provide the speed that they need. So I think it will help. I just don't know if it's enough. I don't know. It's pretty costly to run fiber to locations. And I'm hoping it's enough.
And that actually opens a very, very important question that I also thought of yesterday. I am an electrical engineer. However, I've only practiced telecommunications during my career, in IT in particular, and I couldn't help but to ask the question. I mean, when you're talking about connectivity, there's the wired and there's the wireless connectivity. So the wired, we always used to call it money sunk in the sand. Why? Because laying out the fiber connections and connecting rural areas with fiber is extremely costly, and the business case is always terrible. It will only pay off in 20, 25, 30 years. And this is why you see only huge companies are able to step in, because they kind of bank on upselling or cross-selling you other products and services to make the business plan a little bit, or the business case a little bit more enticing for them. The question that I had over here is that our reliance on wireless connectivity as an alternative is imminent. We have to at a certain point in time, especially with technologies like 5G coming in or rolling in. One of the major problems we faced earlier in 2019, and this problem became politicized at a certain point in time, unfortunately as well, was the fact that the 5G technology right now, from an infrastructure perspective, is primarily researched, developed, and offered by companies based out of Europe or China. We have Huawei, the giant coming from the east, along with ZTE, probably partially. And then you have the Nokia and the Ericsson coming out of the Western Europe, right? Specifically Sweden, right? We do not have any local presence of a technology provider, or I would say manufacturer of that scale, that could guarantee the existence of our 5G and 5+ in the future to offer wireless connectivity specific to rural areas and other areas in the country. We don't seem to be now. Earlier in 2020, the FCE ordered everybody to any manufacturer, and we are totally reliant right now on two companies, Ericsson and Nokia. Believe it or not, all our networks in the country, 5G networks, run on either Ericsson or Nokia, which is pretty much the same house, you can think of it, right? Are there any efforts? Because that's also infrastructure. That's also incredibly important. That's integral to how we run and do our business. I know a lot of people right now who are connecting to the cloud, who are performing their day-to-day activities by connecting to the cloud through wireless technologies and not wired. You can't just get fiber to every home and house out there. But we're not investing enough. There's absolutely no effort whatsoever, whether on on legislative state, or even on the private sector or public. There's just no talks about this, that, hey guys, we have a major crisis over here. We're depending on a foreign country to enable our infrastructure for wireless connectivity and communications. Is that something on the ACEC radar? Is there even any talks or thoughts around this?
Unfortunately, it is not a high-level topic of discussion, and I would think for what's actually going on with the infrastructure and everything else that's going on. But you do raise a good point, and just like any business or any industry, you really have to do serious risk management. And if you have a system that is subject to failure or ability not to deliver, then you have a problem. We found out, unfortunately, we usually find out when there's a crisis. As an example, in the pandemic, we found out all our medical supplies were not being made in the United States. That put us at a very big handicap. And you described a similar situation here. Something goes bad from only two, there's not much redundancy in that system. And it's probably a good point that you raised, and I will bring it back to ACC to make sure that people are aware of it.
Now, going down to project delivery, and then we're gonna pretty much wrap up this this session today. So when it comes down to project delivery and the methods to a successful and profitable delivery, it's very easy to slip when you're managing large projects and you're doing these, financial sensitivity analysis and running the projects. It could really be easy to slip, whether it's on the design stage or on the build stage or construction and management kind of risk stage. How important is it? And that's a question to Mr. John Renolds over here. What do you guys do at SWA to ensure that your projects don't slip behind? They just continue to deliver as planned, whether it's an IT project, you're rolling out a new technology or a tool, or supporting onboarding new people and providing them what they need to be productive and efficient.
Yeah, so we keep a close eye on all of the projects. I mean, every Monday morning, all the teams meet in all the offices. They go over, where they're at, the staff they're going to need. They meet weekly with accounting, with our upper management. They're constantly having overviews of the project from the production area and side of it to how the project is going, how long it's going to go. So I think they just watch them closely, the same in IT. So we keep projects going and keep an eye on it. Every once in a while, we get spread a little thin because we have multiple projects happening at once. And that's kind of, I guess, where the trouble could come in with the infrastructure bill, is getting too many projects going and not being able to keep the eyes on the project and run it properly.
Because that's another problem that we currently come across very frequently. There is just not enough project managers out there, believe it or not, but there's just not enough project managers. And that's just another dimension that we really need to pay attention to. If we are to realize or deliver these projects on time, we need project management in place. You need this to be properly organized and driven. And there's just not enough out there. So have you thought of this problem? The question goes to you as well, Ray or Mike or anyone in the audience. Just feel free to chip in.
I was going to say, as you were talking there, it made me think back to the KPI, made me think back to resources. When you talk about resources, I think in this stage, or the project management aspect, this is where IT can succeed or fail when it comes to KPIs, right? I mean, this is where we can help with the efficiencies. This is where the resources come into play with our applications. Are we utilizing effective, integrated, automated applications that can help best with the project workflows? Those are some of the things I've been trying to look at here, and I know we're all struggling with that. So it just made me think about, you were talking about the KPIs and resources. I think this is where the two can come together.
We're pretty much at the top of the hour over here. I'll open the floor if there are any other questions from the audience. Mr. Charles, well, thank you for joining us. And any last, what should we wish for? Again, I think we started by asking what should we wish for, and we're going to wrap it up by asking, should we just jump back in front of our screens and listen to the news, or where our thoughts should be at right now?
If I had a wish that could be granted, I would say to all the elected officials that are involved with the infrastructure legislation, please do the right thing and pass this bill. It's good for America, it's good for engineering, and it's good for society, and it's good for every one of us.
Well, thank you for this. I second your opinion over here. Well, thank you for joining us. Same thing for the audience over here. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to wrap this up by some statement that we had over here. It would be crazy to pump hundreds of billions into new infrastructure projects while still relying on designs and management systems that are out of the 1930s. That's a statement made by Mr. David McKinney. He is a VP of Government Relations at Bentley Systems. I thought it's pretty captive to look at and kind of contemplate on. Again, thank you very much. We wish the best. Thank you for joining us today. We truly wish ACEC the best in all the efforts. We thank you for all the efforts you're putting out there, pretty much for the better of the engineering society in general. And hopefully we'll see you again in our future episodes. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks,
luck.
everybody.